Welcome to the cheating channel. His name was Carl Montefiore. He was a tall, lanky guy, probably considered handsome, with a smug look in his eyes. Even if he hadn't slept with my wife, I probably would have wanted to knock the arrogance right out of him. But in that moment, his look wasn't smug. It was shocked. When I walked into his office, he thought he was meeting a potential client for his software development company, not coming face to face with a husband who'd been betrayed. He stood up to greet me with a friendly smile, and I saw that he didn't even remember my face, despite us having met a few times. "Good morning, Mr. Reagan, right? Nice to meet you, please have a seat." His handshake was firm and confident, definitely the mark of an experienced salesman. I sat down and stared at him coldly for a few moments before I spoke. "Actually, I'm not Reagan, Carl. My name's Proctor. David Proctor, Lauren's husband. Lauren Proctor from your HR department, the one you've been involved with for the past few months." His face became very tense, and he just stared at me, saying nothing. I pulled out a stack of photos from the envelope and tossed them in front of him. "That's you with her at the hotel on Montgomery Road. Room 128 right behind you. Seems like you two prefer the same room every time." Still silence. "Who's paying for the room, Carl, you or my charming wife?" I knew the answer, but I wanted to see what he would say. "I pay," he finally said, staring past me at the far wall. "I have an arrangement with the manager, we handle their accounting, and they reserve rooms for us." Again silence. I wasn't in a hurry. Of course I was angry, hell I was furious. But I'd been in this state for almost 5 weeks now, so I had no reason to rush. "All right," he finally said. "So what do you want?" He suddenly looked older, as if all the energy had drained out of him. "What do you want from me?" "Carl, outside in my car is a large manila envelope addressed to your wife's office. I'm planning to drop by the FedEx office as soon as I leave here, unless you're willing to cooperate more during this visit." His face went pale, but he somehow managed to stay seated. I had to admire his composure. It would be very bad if Emily found out about this. He looked at me. "What do you want me to do?" I handed him a piece of paper. "Read this. Then call my wife right now and talk to her about it. You can change the wording, adjust whatever silly pet name you use with her, whatever you want. Just make it sound natural, like something she'd expect from you. But make sure you say exactly what I've written here." He read it carefully, then looked up. "I'm not sure if she will agree to this." I laughed. "Carl, I've listened to audio recordings of half a dozen of your little sessions with my wife. You two have done far more twisted things than this." He blushed when I mentioned that I had heard them together. He thought for a moment, frowning, and then asked, "And if I do this, what then?" I shrugged. "Then you'll get rid of me. Whatever you and Lauren do after today, I couldn't care less." "And the FedEx envelope for my wife?" I shrugged again. "I'll throw it away." "You give me your word, Mr. Proctor." I leaned forward. "You're not really in a position to negotiate, Carl. But yes, you have my word." He read my script again, then looked at me. When I didn't move, he sighed and picked up the phone. "As for Lauren and me, it's pretty much the same old story, not really worth retelling. We met when she was in college and I had my first job. It was a blind date. She was a good friend of my cousin Marie, who thought we'd hit it off, and we did. Our relationship was completely typical, but that doesn't mean it wasn't amazing. I fell in love with Lauren around our 5th date, and she seemed to feel the same way about me. At first, intimacy was a bit vanilla, a bit careful, but we truly opened up to each other, and things only got better and better. We got married about 14 months later, with Marie as the maid of honor and my brother Bobby as the best man. Almost right away, we had Tina, an unplanned but wonderful event. She's a tennis star, a great student, and a talented artist, a fantastic, energetic, sweet girl, and I adore her. Lauren and I always said we'd have only one child, but we have the best child in the world. I'd say Lauren and I had a great marriage and a great life. Really, that's what I'd always say whenever anyone asked how things were going. Sometimes she'd flirt a little with our friends at parties, but she would always reassure me afterward. After all, our intimacy was never better than after we spent time with others, and she made sure I knew how attractive she was to other men. I never doubted Lauren's loyalty to me, not once in 19 years. No signs, no suspicious looks, no sudden rushes home to take a shower, no late nights at the office, no unexplained marks on her body. Nothing. Our intimacy didn't increase or decrease. It didn't get better or worse. I would have never known. Looking back, I think Lauren was a little happier that spring, a bit more lively and cheerful. But it wasn't significant enough for me to notice until I learned about her affair. Tina was the one who found out. It was one of the worst things, though the whole situation was terrible. On a Saturday morning in early April, during her senior year, I was helping my brother move some furniture, and Tina was supposed to be away at a tennis tournament for the day. But the courts had flooded due to a heavy rainstorm the night before, and the tournament was canceled. Tina's teammate Avery gave her a ride home around 11 a.m., several hours earlier than expected. Tina dropped her bag, grabbed a Diet Cola from the fridge, and reached for the phone to call a friend about the party that was happening that evening. She pressed the speakerphone button, unaware that her mom was already on the line, and heard a man's voice say, "Your tight little body again." Shocked, Tina quickly hung up the phone. A minute or two later, she quietly crept down the hallway and peeked into the bedroom. Lauren was lying on the bed, wearing nothing but her underwear. One hand rested lazily inside her panties, while the other held the phone. Tina heard her say, "Oh yes, baby, I can't wait either. Maybe we can do it this Monday? Or will I have to wait until Wednesday for that?" Stepping away from the door, Tina slipped back into the kitchen, grabbed her tennis bag, and left the house. She went to the playground at the nearby elementary school and sat there crying for 2 hours. Then she pulled herself together, wiped her face, and walked back home. I didn't hear anything about it for almost 2 weeks. All I knew was that Tina had become withdrawn, moody, and sullen. Like a typical teenager, I guess, except that she had always been so sunny and full of life. I asked Lauren if she noticed anything going on with her, and she seemed as puzzled as I was. When Tina finally broke down and told me, it happened on the way back from a qualifying tournament. She had played much worse than usual and lost to a girl from Lakeland Middle School, someone she had beaten 4 times over the last 2 years, and I knew something was off. So, I stopped by a cafe, bought us both something to eat, and parked the car in the large lot of a nearby shopping center. Then I said, "Sweetheart, tell me what's going on." She shrugged. "Nothing. I played badly, that's all." I reached over and touched her shoulder. "Tina, you know that doesn't bother me. It's just one tennis match. But you've been unhappy for weeks. Please talk to me. Talk to your old, clueless dad who loves you." Then I waited. Over the years, I had learned that Tina couldn't stand silence. She just stared out the window, not moving, and suddenly I saw tears on her cheeks. Without turning her head, she said, "Dad, Mom is cheating on you." What? I was on the verge of shouting at her, telling her it was ridiculous, that it was madness, that she'd lost her mind. But I held back. I bit my tongue and waited, and she told me the whole story, about how she had come home early, what she heard, and what she saw. Of course, it was impossible to believe. I trusted what Tina was saying, but I couldn't believe what it meant, what it had to mean. We cried together a little, and then I asked her to keep it a secret while I tried to figure things out. So, Tina and I made a sort of pact, a small private deal to keep all our suspicions and feelings hidden from Lauren. In fact, it brought us closer, although we had always had a great relationship. And I did what any wronged husband or wife, I suppose, does in situations like this. I spent a few thousand on a private investigator and let him do his job. 3 weeks later, I had a report, photos, and an audio recording. That Thursday, I went to work, locked my door, turned off my phone, and focused on the matter at hand. I read and listened to everything. I cried and cursed. I took off my shoe and threw it across the room, knocking a framed college diploma off the wall. I slammed my fist on the desk. I paced around the room, sobbing. Then I sat at my desk and stared out the window. When I finally calmed down, around 1:30 p.m., I went out for a late lunch at a diner. Over a Reuben sandwich and 2 cups of coffee, I started making plans. Even though we had a completely ordinary married life, it still meant so much to me. I loved Lauren passionately for almost 20 years, and I never had a reason to doubt how lucky I was that she married me. We enjoyed each other's company and just being together. We were friends, valued the same things, and wanted the same things out of life. I would have said we were the happiest couple in the strongest marriage I knew. But maybe not, right? As soon as I saw the private investigator's report, I knew it was over between us. I could have, gotten over a brief fling, but she and Carl Montefiore had been enjoying each other's company for several weeks, with a lot of enthusiasm on both sides, from what I could tell. And they had a physical relationship. It had long passed the stage of hurried encounters. They were playing games, she was dressing up for him in lingerie, they used toys, experimented with blindfolds and handcuffs. A lot more, far beyond what had ever happened in our bedroom. One day, I picked Tina up early from school, and we went out to lunch together. I spared her the details, but I told her it was a real affair and that I was going to leave her mom. Tina was angry and upset. She wanted to go straight home and confront Lauren, but I calmed her down. Listen, sweetheart, you know your mom loves you. She adores you. This wasn't done to you, it was done to me. Maybe she didn't do it on purpose to hurt me. I'm sure she thinks I'll never find out. But she betrayed me, not you, and it's up to me to decide how to handle it. Do you think you can keep up the act for a few more weeks? Be the typical daughter, not act unusual until school is over. She nodded reluctantly. I guess so, Dad. I mean, if that's what you want. It's just, she started sniffling again. It's just, how could she do that to you, to us? You're so good to her, and her voice broke into sobs, and I moved to her side of the booth and hugged her while she cried. In the end, Tina promised to act like a loving daughter until graduation. 3 days later, she was heading off to a 10-week junior tennis camp in Colorado, and then, after a week at home, she was leaving for the University of California. I made it clear to her that I was going to file for divorce after she left for the summer. And then I'll take some time off and do a bit of traveling, sweetheart. How about I stop by Denver for a few days and visit you? She wiped her eyes, tried to smile, and replied, Yeah, Dad, that would be great. I took care of all the routine matters in advance. Found an apartment, set up credit cards in a checking account, and took time off work to fly out to the West Coast. I planned to visit my old college roommate in San Francisco for a few days, then rent a car, drive through the Rockies, hang out with Tina in Colorado for a while, and then fly back home. That morning, as soon as Lauren left for work, I waited for the movers to pick up my share of the furniture and take it to my new apartment, along with my clothes, computer, and the rest of my things. Then I went to meet Carl Montefiore. I've already told you about that. I had lunch and dropped the envelope for Mrs. Montefiore into the FedEx box outside the courthouse. Did you really think I would keep my word to that jerk? After he spent weeks sleeping with my wife. At 1:45 p.m., I parked my car near the restaurant across the street from the hotel, found a secluded spot, and started watching. Lauren drove in and parked right in front of room 128. She went into the main office, came back a minute or two later, slipped the key card under the mat in front of room 128, used another key to enter, and closed the door behind her. She had a shopping bag with her, and I figured it contained everything Carl had asked for during their little phone conversation. I waited about 10 minutes, then walked up to the door, pulled the card from under the mat, and went inside. There was Lauren, my wife, the woman I had loved, cherished, and been faithful to for 20 years. She was lying on the bed, dressed in a very revealing black teddy and nothing else. She was on her stomach, her hips propped up by 2 pillows beneath her, positioned so that she was exposed from the other side of the room. She was wearing a sleep mask. She couldn't see a thing. I saw her tense up when she heard the door open and close. Carl. Oh, you scared me, baby. I was just lying here and... Shoo, I whispered. I walked over to the bed and leaned over to whisper in her ear. Shoo, my little peach. That's what he called her in some of the recordings I had heard. God knows why. I put on a bit of Carl's cologne, so she had no reason to think I wasn't her lover. And now I'm here to drive you crazy. I whispered, knowing she wouldn't recognize my voice. Without saying another word, I found the shopping bag on the chair and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. I cuffed Lauren's hands above her head, then took a long rope from my pocket. Tying one end of the rope to the handcuffs, I slid the remaining length under the bed, walked around to the other side, pulled it up and tied the other end. Using two shorter ropes, I tied one end of each to her ankles and the other to the bedposts at the foot of the bed. Now she was spread out in the middle of the bed, unable to move freely. "You've been a bad girl, haven't you?" I whispered. She giggled, and I gave her a light smack on the backside. She jumped and squealed. I didn't hit her hard, of course, not with the anger I was actually feeling. "Oh yes, baby, I've been a very bad girl. Are you going to punish me?" she said, smiling and teasing me. Without saying another word, I removed my clothes and stood silently, knowing she had no idea where I was. "Carl, baby." She sounded excited but a little nervous. I made her wait a couple more minutes while she called out for me, or for him, I suppose. Then, without warning, I lightly tapped her again. "Oh, Carl, what, that hurts, baby, what?" When I finished, she simply said, "Damn, baby, that really hurt. What was that for?" I leaned in close, pressing my body against hers, and whispered in her ear, "Aren't you a bad girl? A little cheat. A cheat who's betraying her husband." She frowned and said, "No more talking about him. Remember?" Ignoring her, I continued, "What do you think he would say if he saw you like this? Here, completely at my mercy, what would he say?" "Stop it," Lauren whimpered. "Just hold me, okay? Let's focus on us." In a breathless voice, she added, "I know I've been wrong, but I need you to forgive me and remind me that I'm yours." And so I did, though I took my time. I knew this would be the last time things would be this way between us. As I drew closer, teasing her gently, she responded eagerly, but I stopped just short of giving her what she wanted. "You can't just leave me like this," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "Please don't stop now." But I waited, watching her grow impatient, letting her calm down. Then I teased her again, and once more after that. By the third time, she was exhausted, her voice trembling as she pleaded, "Please just let me find some peace. I can't take it anymore." I sat near her, and she responded eagerly again. I whispered, "Do you like this, baby? Is it better than before?" Before she could answer, I continued to guide her. She struggled a bit, but I didn't stop. After a long, intense moment, I finally pulled away, collapsing beside her in silence. Eventually, she remarked in a playful tone, "That was amazing. What got into you today?" I got up without a word and started to get dressed. She smiled dreamily, looking satisfied. "That was great, Carl," she said again. When I didn't respond, she asked, "Baby? Carl, where are you?" Fully dressed, I returned to the bed beside her. "Right here, little peach," I said in my own voice as I removed the sleep mask from her eyes. Her eyes opened, and she smiled at me, a bit dazed as she began to focus. Then she gasped, "Oh," a short sound that was instantly cut off. I looked at her, and her expression shifted to one of fear. Her eyes widened, and her mouth tightened into a frightened grimace. I had all sorts of angry words ready, weeks of rage and suffering that I was prepared to unleash on her. But instead, I said nothing, simply watching her face as she processed what had happened in the motel room over the previous 2 hours. Lauren had gone pale. She nervously licked her lips, looking at my impassive expression. Oh God, David, I can't think about what you, sweetheart, it's not what you think. I mean, it's not." She couldn't finish her sentence. Perhaps that was understandable given the circumstances. I silently watched her, and tears began to spill from the corners of her eyes. She lay there, exposed, wearing only a teddy that clung to her chest, sweaty, with evidence of the encounter dripping from her hands tied above her head. She started to cry, shaking her head, still looking at me, but shaking her head and saying, No, it's not, you can't, it's not." I stood up and continued to observe her, still saying nothing while her sobs grew louder. Then I took out a prepaid mobile phone and pressed the pre-programmed number. When the voice on the other end said, "This is the Eyewitness News hotline," I replied, "Yes. I'm at the hotel on Montgomery Road, and there seems to be some sort of disturbance or altercation in the adjacent room, number 128. "Yes," I continued. "I can't say whether a woman is being assaulted or not, but there are a lot of screams and shouts. I already called 911, but I thought I should call you as well. Without waiting for a response, I ended the call. Lauren stopped crying. She turned her head to look at me, horror etched on her face. No, baby, please don't let them. Don't let anyone see me. Please, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, Dave. Looking her straight in the eyes, I dialed the number again. 911, what's your emergency? Asked a voice. Yes, I'm at a hotel and some guy, excuse me, a man is having an intimate encounter with a woman in room 128, and the door is wide open so anyone can see. I walked by with my kids, and, oh my God, he has her tied to the bed and everything. I hung up the phone. Lauren screamed in panic, trying to break free. Please, baby, please don't leave me here, I'm begging you, please. I leaned down and covered her mouth with my hand, holding her face firmly so she couldn't escape. Her eyes were wide with fear as they searched mine. I held her like that for a few minutes, just looking at her. I stared at the face of the woman I had loved for nearly my entire adult life. Then I released her and left the room, ignoring her desperate screams and pleas behind me. I used a cushion from the sofa to prop the door and stepped outside to the parking lot, sitting on a bench by the street. About 4 minutes later, a large, eyewitness news van pulled into the lot. I waited until two guys, one carrying a large camera, headed toward the open door of room 128, then crossed the street, got into my car, and drove away. There should be another scene, right? It would be great to wrap it all up right now. Lauren tied to the bed, the film crew heading into the room, the police already on their way. But there are always consequences, whether you like them or not. Unless someone has died, I suppose. Then there are no consequences, at least not for him. It was a Saturday in mid-September, and I was driving back home, the home where Lauren, Tina, and I once lived together. Now I lived in an apartment downtown. Tina was in the dorms at the University of California, and the house was up for sale. Lauren couldn't afford the mortgage on her own. After my little adventure with Lauren, which ended my marriage, I flew to San Francisco for a break. I visited my brother, drove through the Rockies, and had a great time with my daughter. Then I returned home and began to build a new life, a life as a single man. I asked my lawyer to initiate the divorce process and avoided any contact with Lauren, except for a message stating that I was giving her until November 1st to buy my half of the house. After that, I planned to sell it. She called and texted me for several weeks, but I didn't respond. I had nothing to say to her and didn't want to hear anything from her. My friend kept an eye on how the press was covering my little escapade. A couple of articles appeared in the local newspaper without photos, unfortunately, and there were 3 days of segments on the local eyewitness news at 11 o'clock. They had shot some footage, the camera zooming in on the open door of the motel, then a partial view of the tied-up woman on the bed. Unfortunately, Lauren's face wasn't visible, and the news channel didn't mention any names, likely to avoid a lawsuit. Oh well. But Mrs. Montefiore, as they say, was in the process of exposing her husband, and she made enough noise at the company to get Lauren fired. The word spread among our friends about who that unnamed lady was in the crazy motel story, and I was perfectly fine with that. Lauren had to take an administrative job 20 miles from home, with a lower salary. I knew she wouldn't be able to afford the house, and judging by what Tina told me, she was unhappy and apologized all week when Tina returned, then left again for college. Tina was still so angry that she hardly spoke to her mother. I drove up to the driveway, parked, and walked into the house. Lauren had agreed to sign the divorce papers and the power of attorney for the house if I came to talk to her. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching me as I walked in. "Hi, David," she said softly. "Lauren." She looked older and a bit smaller. She hadn't slept well and probably hadn't been eating properly. My heart didn't swell with sympathy. "Do you want some coffee?" "No thanks." I poured myself a glass of water and sat down. She gestured toward the counter and said, "All the papers are here. I've signed them. How much time do I have before I need to start looking for a place?" "Probably at least 2 to 3 months. Even if it sells immediately, it usually takes people a couple of months to close the deal. I'll let you know." A silence fell between us. "I know it's over," she suddenly said. "I've thought about it for a long time, as you can probably imagine. I asked myself why I was such a fool, And I mean, I thought about how I would feel if the situation were reversed, if you had an affair behind my back. And I can't even imagine accepting you back under any circumstances. The feeling of betrayal, shock, humiliation, the anger at being deceived and treated with such disdain. She looked at me with a sad but dry expression. I'm just trying to say that I understand, David. Or at least I think I do. I won't pretend to know how it feels for you. If there were any chance, any way, I don't know, to find a way to give me another chance, I would do anything, give you all my loyalty and love to make up for what I did. But I don't think that's possible. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, but all she could see was an empty stare. What I really wanted to say is that I'm very sorry. I'm sorry for cheating on you. Sorry for behaving so poorly. Sorry for not respecting all the love, loyalty, and support you've given me since the day we met. I'm sure my apologies mean nothing to you, but you deserve them, and I wanted to offer them anyway. She looked at me, undoubtedly hoping I would say something even slightly comforting, but I didn't. I just stared at her, no nod, no aha, just looked. Did Tina tell you how we found out? She nodded, her face tense with pain. I asked her several times, and she finally told me. I feel so awful about it. To be clear, David, this was never about humiliating you or causing you pain. I know I was an idiot to think I could keep everything a secret, but that's what I was trying to do. At least we thought we were being very careful. She began to tell me how it all started, and I raised my hand. I don't want to hear this. I don't care how it started, why you did it, how long it lasted, and all that. You wanted to tell me you're sorry, fine, you said it. Is there anything else? I knew I was acting like a heartless jerk, and it was somewhat surprising.